Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about the Phiharmonic system, which is a compositional approach which contrasts maximally rational and irrational numbers. Music is full of rational numbers. For example, we have things like how we write time signatures. We write things like 3/4 and 4/4 and 31, 32. And all of these numbers are essentially rational. And even we have things called irrational time signatures. And in fact, they're still rational. We have things like 3/6 or 4/7. And these things are still really rational relationships. Also, in other areas of music, for example, when we have come to pitch or frequency, octaves are related by being double or half the frequency. And similarly, we can find the fifth, we can find the fourth, we can find the third, and so on, in the same way, certainly with just intonation. So, to a large extent at least, when it comes to pitch and frequency, these are governed by rational relationships. Similarly, when it comes to timbre, timbre is also governed to a large extent, or at least influenced to a large extent by rational numbers. And this is sort of an unavoidable physical reality that when we have a string, that string also has a length which is it has a full length, and then it has half a length and a third of a length, and that string will vibrate at its full frequency, but also at a frequency half of that, and a third of that, and a quarter of that, and a fifth of that, and so on, ad infinitum. So, and all those frequencies will add together to create the timbre that we hear. But those relationships are, to a large extent at least, or really most of the time, certainly when it comes to strings and pipes and even buildings, in fact, they resonate and they move around and vibrate at frequencies that are related to each other much of the time. And that's really how we discern, one of the ways in which we discern timbre. So all these rational numbers seem to appear in music all the time. And what happens if we start using irrational numbers to govern these areas like pitch and timbre, and even rhythm, I suppose, to an extent too? What does that sound like, and how does that work? Well, there's irrational numbers. When I'm talking about irrational numbers, I'm talking about things like pi, for example. Pi is an irrational number because it can't be expressed correctly, at least completely correctly, as a fraction. Of course, it can be kind of expressed as a fraction, like 22/7, but it's not exact. But there is a sort of the king of irrational numbers, if you like, and that is this number phi. And phi has some very interesting qualities. If you think about its how it works, phi basically is that it's expressed in this way, that a over b is equal to a plus b over a. That rectangle there expresses really what phi is about, and it can also be expressed in this formula here, 1 plus or minus the square root of 5/2. And the number phi, or the golden ratio, or the golden mean, or the divine proportion, it has many different names, is this number here, 1.61803, and so on. But really it works as a ratio. It's 1 to 1.618 and so on. That really is the magic behind it, not so much the number in and of itself, in a way. So this is the most irrational number, and we find this number a lot in architecture, we find it in art, and we even find it in nature. So, for example, you can see here, this is a picture from Da Vinci, and it's actually from the book The Divine Proportion that he illustrated. And there are many divine proportions in it, or golden sections, or golden ratios, if you like, in that picture. And you will find that this is another picture, in fact, from the divine proportion, and this is a building, and similarly the building is broken up using the divine proportion. Here's another example. This, of course, is the Great Wave of Kanagawa, and we can see that this is what's called the golden spiral, and these are essentially a set of rectangles which are bigger than each other by phi each time as you go around in this kind of spiral, and it creates this this shape, which we find in what we think of as balanced artwork all the time. But phi also finds its way into nature. For example, the arrangement of the seeds in the sunflower are in fact very similar to if we allowed those seeds to be governed by a phi relationship to each other. And we find this in nature a lot in things like pine kernels and so on. But of course, there's a lot of bunkum out there about phi as well, and sometimes it can be we can apply these golden kind of rectangles and golden spirals to all sorts of things that maybe they don't quite deserve to have them put there. So we have to be very careful about reading too much into this still very special number. So what about previous uses of phi in music? There has been plenty of use of phi in music in the past. Some of it maybe by accident, some of it certainly by design. For example, it can be seen certainly in the structure or form of many classical composers. To name a few, Bach, Beethoven, some would say even Mozart. All of this stuff, you would want to take with a pinch of salt as to whether that was the intention of the composer or not. And we can kind of read a lot into this in a sort of a numerological way that maybe isn't deserved, but there is certainly some truth to the use of phi in the past, and it certainly is a reality. It was discovered quite a long time ago. I guess it would be attributed to Pythagoras. And has been kind of rediscovered many times, I think, along the way, and called different names. Sometimes it's used to govern rhythm. Here's an example from Bartók using the related Fibonacci sequence. So it has been used in music in the past in these long form frequential kind of ideas like form and rhythm and so on. But what about these? What about pitch, and what about timbre, and what would that sound like? Well, I wanted to research to see if there was actually any references to this in the out there in the canon already, and if there was some areas that people had researched this. And there have been some people who have used phi in the governance of pitch and timbre and so on. I also looked at a lot of spectral composers to see the sort of work that they did, because it would inform a little bit about what I wanted to do with these the spectra of phi and the spectra of the harmonic series. And I also wanted to look into microtonality and composers who had used microtonality in the past. And then I also looked at software design, because to hear what phi sounds like, picking up a guitar won't work, because we could try to tune it into kind of phi relationships, but it doesn't really tell us what we needed to know. So I designed a synthesizer, which I call the Phiharmonic visual synthesizer, and I use it as a compositional tool and then also as a sound source. So you can see a picture of it there. It's a 9-voice polyphonic additive synth with 9 oscillators. Essentially, that means that it's kind of has, you can play 9 notes at a time, and each of those notes has a fundamental tone, and then possibly up to 9 tones to be added on top of that, and they can be added in various different ways. Usually they are organized in the harmonic series, so it's a sound that you'll recognize if I play it for you, which I will in a moment. But those partials or oscillators, or those extra kind of noises and sounds, can be morphed from this harmonic relationship into a phi based relationship, which sounds very unusual and quite different to what you'd expect. The synthesizer can be controlled via MIDI. It can also be controlled via an Arduino ultrasonic sensors, and also a game controller. And it is also a visual synthesizer. You can represent the aural output visually as well, with a series of these spiraling dots, which you can kind of see there in the side of the screen there. On each of the pages, I have this kind of arrangement. I also created my own temperament system, because I wanted something that could be a good compromise between the harmonic series and the golden, what we call, I guess, golden octaves or golden sixths, if you like, or golden partials. So I came up with this 12-tone temperament system with some alterations from equal temperament. And I found that a much easier way than creating a large microtonal kind of system, or one with multiple notes, or an uneven, unusual number of notes, and not 12 or whatever, because an instrument like a keyboard continues to be playable. I also kind of devised a compositional approach which essentially was to compare and contrast these two kind of diverse areas, the area of the harmonic series and phi partials, if you like. And I used a sort of a couple of three different sort of techniques. I used what I call mutation, which is basically applying opposing harmonic and partial relationships. So playing, for example, a bunch of notes that are related to the harmonic series, but actually applying the partials from the phi series, if you like, and potentially then even analyzing that and letting instruments play the sound that comes out, which kind of adds another way of changing the sound even more. I also used what I call interpolation or spectral distortion, which is essentially glissandi between the partials or harmonies of the kind of two systems. And then I also use alternation, which is just jumping back and forth between the two sort of temperament areas, the harmonic series and phi. So I'll give you a very quick demonstration, if I can, of what this kind of sounds like. I'll show you first of all the Phiharmonic synthesizer and maybe what it sounds like. So if I play a note here, I can add in all of the partials in the harmonic series up until the ninth partial. And that's a sound that we're kind of used to hearing. We kind of all know what that sounds like. And then what I can do is I can take all those partials and I can morph them into a phi relationship. And then back again. And this allows me to do some very fun and unusual things with the sound. I can then, use that as sort of an inspiration for other instruments, or I can just use the sound of that itself to take it further. So, and there's lots of other features in the synth that I won't talk about now, but I have another video on that on my channel as well that you can have a look at. So that's that is basically the synthesizer. It might be a good idea now to look at some of the a video of some of the compositional approaches that I took and some of the visual output as well that is created from the work. So here we go. Have a listen. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what the Phiharmonic system is capable of, and it gives you an idea of what how the synthesizer works, and how you can use these ideas like interpolation, mutation, and alternation to kind of create interesting sounds. So kind of in conclusion then, I would say that I think that Phi provides a unique timbral and harmonic possibilities for sure, and it's been really interesting kind of looking into this area of Phi and essentially finding out what that sounds like, if you like. I think also that stacked Phi intervals are worthy of further study. I discovered that we can look at Phi, we can look at kind of classical harmony through the lens of Phi and find some quite interesting correlations there, which are not expected, such as the relationship with the minor 4 chord, and also the relationship with the Neapolitan sixth, which is quite interesting, and there's not a lot of research on it from what I can see. Also, the contrast between the Phi and the harmonic series wasn't quite maybe as striking as I would have expected, but still interesting nonetheless, in retrospect. I would also say that I would like to look at other timbral morphing kind of systems, like looking at Phi versus various geometric series and so on, things like that. And of course other irrational numbers too. Finally, the Phiharmonic synthesizer, I think, may have installation possibilities beyond just its use in as a kind of a compositional tool or a sound source. So I hope that has been interesting to you, and if you want to know any more, just get in touch with me either through my YouTube channel or on Twitter at Monocronin, or through Trinity perhaps as well. So thanks very much for listening, and talk to you soon.